thanking everyone here that's attended our webinar today, and basically kind of introduce myself and our partner with AlignRx. My name is Brian Cavallo, and I am the Vice President of Sales and Account Management with UltraBenefits. And joining me today is Kevin Kobielski, CEO and President of AlignRx. AlignRx is a partner of UltraBenefits, and we're proud to offer their services to you as consultants and your clients as a complementary practice of working with UltraBenefits. So we really pride ourselves in working with clients, prospective brokers or a prospective client, to really help evaluate their choice in PBMs. And there's so much more that goes into just evaluating a PBM at the end of the day. And we're going to kind of go over those finer points here this afternoon to really what makes up what I would say is a good fit at the end of the day for your clients. So some of the things that we're going to kind of touch on here today, or that Kevin will be touching on, and I'm going to turn it over to him in a minute, is we're going to be taking a look at strategies that will help you better manage specialty patients and their drug costs. Considering the fact that 15 to 25% of employers' claim spend is in the area of RX, in particular specialty, it's really becoming an important piece of management or risk management under a self-funded setting. There's only so much you can do on the fully insured side, as we all know. Actually, pretty much nothing. But when you are working with a self-funded client, there is an enormous amount that you can do in the area of specialty care, and there are things that you can do to help better manage those specialty RXs and help drive down those costs. So we're going to be touching upon those strategies. Additionally, Kevin's going to kind of highlight some contracting tips and really some things to watch out for in your next PBM evaluation. The devil's in the details, as they say, and Kevin is an expert at PBM contracts and kind of pointing out the good, the bad, and the ugly. He has helped us out countless times on evaluating contracts and really showing us and our clients really, the positive and negatives of PBM contracts. Then we'll take a little peek at marketplace activities and some observations that we are starting to see. And then ultimately, we're going to take a look at how new specialty generics are impacting the employer pharmacy spend. So those are some of the things that we're going to kind of cover today. I really find this as a great educational piece for those here that are attending. My desire is that you walk away with something, learning something that you didn't know, and then potentially, if interested, working with UltraBenefits to help you and your self-funded clients find the right PBM fit, moving forward. So with that said, I want to turn it over to our friend Kevin Kobielski with AlignRx, and he will finish. He'll actually, start our presentation for today. Kevin.
Sorry, I was on mute. So just a little bit of background for myself. So I have kind of been in this business for about 20 years, helping clients navigate this crazy pharmacy world that we're in. I actually started out on, I worked at a health plan. So I did a lot of the underwriting, the clinical management. So I kind of have a unique view where I was kind of on both sides of this. So with anything else, this is a really complicated topic, and we'll kind of get into some of the details. But Kristen, if you want to kick the slide forward, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some trends and what we're seeing. And I always love these slides because I don't know where these PBMs make these numbers up, but to me, they're almost fictional. And the way that this chart is laid out is that the first section here is the change in trend for non-specialty drugs, so your traditional drugs. Now, these numbers are low. I don't know if they're negative, but we've seen them in the 3 to 4% range. The second piece is specialty by PBM, and then the total is on the right-hand side. So I would take these with a grain of salt, because I think, based on some of the stuff and some of the strategies we're going to talk about today, oftentimes what ends up happening is if you implement a specialty program like a MAP program, manufacturer assistance program, and that cost is carved outside your plan, and then you're paying the cost of the 30% of the savings, that's not recognized in these numbers because those costs aren't included here. So these numbers to me don't make a ton of sense. I think on average, most people's trends are between 8 and 10% overall, specialty really driving a big piece of that. But I think that it is interesting because over time, the PBMs have reported less and less of this. So you can see right here, CVS only reported an aggregate total of 2.9%. And I will tell you, we have CVS clients and none of them are near 2.9%. So I would take these with a grain of salt. So Kristen, you could kick it to the next slide. So this is pretty interesting. So what this shows you is what is really driving specialty these days, because what we're going to talk about is some of the things you can do about specialty, and the change in utilization across the board is what's driving specialty. So more and more drugs coming through the pipeline, and that has resulted in a greater percentage of your spend being specialty related. And the unit cost, what that's telling you is you got to make sure you have a great RX contract. And I've spent my life negotiating these, and we do this for Ultra today, and I believe they have some very aggressive contracts based on what I've seen in the market. So I think they're very, very well positioned. So if you look at the overall change in specialty drug spending, now you're getting into some of the double digits, which I think is more realistic. And even if you kind of look at these PBMs, right, where Navitus is a clinically based, transparent PBM, comparing them to ESI, and somehow ESI would have a lower specialty trend, just doesn't make any sense to me. So just so everyone knows, when you see these numbers, there's no like committee or standard that's kind of policing this. So the PBMs can report whatever they want, which is unfortunate. You could move to the next slide. So when I was working back at the health plans, specialty was 30% of spend, and we kept saying at some point it's going to be over 50, and I guess it is now over 50. So specialty has become the key driver of cost for all of my clients. But luckily, there's a lot of solutions out there that are able to drive value here. Because it is such a significant portion of the spend. And luckily, the only upside to this is usually it's a very small population of your members that are utilizing these drugs. So any type of intervention that you do ultimately bring on board, the disruption profile is pretty low. So we've had a lot of clients implement some of the solutions we're going to talk about today, and had very little kind of member noise. So here's kind of what's going on, which I don't think is a very good thing for this business, where you have the vast majority of utilization for pharmacy and medical going through three organizations: Aetna, United, Cigna, and then Anthem. And there's been a lot of vertical integration where health plans have acquired standalone PBMs, and now you are having less competition, and then you're having a scenario where the vendors you're potentially choosing are significantly larger than you. So it creates this dynamic where I've seen is that if you kind of try to go direct to ESI or Optum, and you're a group under 1,000 lives, you're going to have a hard time getting a quote from them. And even if you do, it's not very competitive. So, the notion here is that I don't know ultimately what's going to happen in this space. The government may get involved because we do have kind of consolidation of market share in a few different entities, but this is an interesting dynamic that has come up over the last few years. you could change. So here's it kind of in more from a number perspective. If you look, so CVS is owned by Aetna. Cigna owns Express Scripts, and United obviously owns Optum. So if you take those three together, it's over 75% of the PBM market share. And then you have Humana, who's in there, MedImpact, which really isn't in the group space. They don't really do much there. Humana doesn't really do much. And Prime Therapeutics is owned by some of the Blues plans. So that's, in order to get access to that PBM, you really have to be engaged with the Blues plan. So again, this is really not, I think, positive for all of us out there that are trying to control costs, because what ends up ultimately happening is when you, and we see this all the time, right? You try to go to CVS and say, well, we want to add this program on, they won't allow you to do it. So then your only other option is to go to a mid-sized firm that will allow you to kind of bolt on different solutions, which I think ultimately is the way to go, because now you have flexibility. I'm willing to take a little bit of a discount from a pricing perspective to have flexibility and the ability to implement programs that can drive costs down for, my clients. I love this slide. This is one of my favorite slides. So what this is chronologically is, if you think about 100% of PBM revenue and profit, what drives that over time? So you start in 2015, you end up in 2021. And some of the interesting things to note here is rebate revenue has gone down because obviously, clients have gotten more sophisticated in that space. You have spread being reduced, and spread is the difference between what the PBM is charging and what they pay the pharmacy. The increase really has been in fees. So what we see a lot of is this kind of nickel and diming with all these admin fees for different services like PAs or step therapy or whatever it is. There is a lot of that going on, and then you definitely see a reduction in mail order. I think mail order really has fallen out of favor because of the economics aren't as strong as they used to be, and it does create a lot of member names. So we've seen kind of mail order drop off over the few years, which I don't really think it's a big impact, but we'll talk about in a little bit. International mail order has become something that's utilized by a lot of our clients that I think can save some money. And so here's the thing, specialty. This is why, so it went from 17% in 2015 to 36%, the vast majority of their revenue. And the reason for that is they own their own specialty pharmacy. And if you think about the proliferation of all these specialty copay programs, where, if you work with CVS, they work with Prudent, or if you work with ESI, they get Save On. Now, they will charge you a 25% fee, but there's no doubt CVS and ESI are both getting pieces of that. So there was a question here. This is what I really don't understand about PBMs. Is it the wizard? So Jennifer, you want to give more clarity on that question, or did I already answer your question? I will take that as a yes. So here's the thing. If you look at the top, so what this is basically the revenue per top pharmacies in the United States in 2021. Combined with their retail and self-funded, CVS is over 125, roughly, maybe a little less, $1 billion going through their specialty pharmacy. Those are really big numbers. And if you think about the dynamics of specialty, right? So I was just putting a document together where we were looking at the trend of specialty over time. And what's happening is these manufacturers are taking 7, 10, 12% increases every year. So if you think about that, and ESI, Caremark, Optum, and the PBM are getting a percentage of that, their revenue goes up every year based on increased prices. So think about that from if that's where they're making their money, what is their incentive to take those high cost specialty drugs off of formulary? So it is a very interesting dynamic that specialty is driving a lot of profitability, and the specialty pharmacies are the ones driving a ton of the revenue for these very, very large organizations. And then actually Jennifer brings up a great point. So the other interesting thing there is that the PBM also controls the gateway to the specialty pharmacy. So they are doing the and they own their specialty pharmacy. So that is the fox watching the henhouse, right? Where you have a situation where if I approve a drug, I make more money. If I deny it, I make less. There is definitely incentives there for these PBMs to approve medications a little more liberally than you would want them to. The other interesting thing that's going on here is there has been a significant increase in the amount of drugs that are excluded from the formulary. And the primary driver of this is rebates. Because what ends up happening is the more drugs, and the drugs that are excluded are typically brand medications in a class where there are multiple brand medications. So the idea behind that for ESI, Optum, or any PBM is that you go to the 3 insulin providers and ask those folks, what's the deepest rebate? And whoever has that wins. Because you can even see what's going on with biosimilars is the biosimilars aren't even on a preferred position on these formularies because they don't drive rebate revenue. So there is definitely some things wrong with this system where, rebate volume and yield is driving business, where you really need to look at the overall holistic approach, and what is driving your savings is also based on clinical management and the ability to bring in third-party vendors to drive costs down. If a PBM is not going to allow you to do anything, that doesn't help anybody other than the PBM, right? So there is a lot of dynamics. And then the other thing here, when I talk about a rebate, basically what the rebate is a drug. Let's say you have Humira that costs $4,000 a month. The manufacturer will offer a rebate to the PBM for every claim that's processed. And let's just keep the math simple. And let's say it's $1,000 rebate. So the cost of the drug is $4,000. Obviously, you factor in member cost share. Then you get $1,000 back, the PBM does, from the manufacturer. And then the key here is, does that PBM give that back to the client? And that's where we get into all the contract language and making sure that the contracts are fully vetted and that you're getting rebates, because it is definitely something that is important ultimately for driving costs down. Kristen, you get it the next slide. So the other thing I wanted to kind of bring up, and for those Star Trek folks out there, I think medical injectable management is the new frontier. I really do. I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity. Let's talk about what a medical injectable is. A medical injectable is a drug that is usually dispensed or infused at a hospital outpatient, physician office, or home infusion. So these drugs are on the medical side. They're very expensive. They're usually used to treat very complex conditions, like Remicade would be an example that probably most people are familiar with. But the interesting thing that's what's going on in this space is you have seen a lot of biosimilar adoption. So, for example, with Remicade, there's 2 or 3 biosimilars already. So, as more and more biosimilars come out, I think we're going to start seeing a little bit of shifting on the medical side to a biosimilar first strategy, because ultimately these biosimilars are one quarter of the cost of the reference product. In this case, Inflectra or Renflexis would be significantly cheaper than Remicade. And we've seen a lot of plans start going in that direction as far as their policy development. Yep. The other interesting notion here is if you look at these drugs, so the way that this works is the ones in the blue across the top are the reference brand products. So if you look at Herceptin, it's got 4 or 5 biosimilars here. Remicades got Inflectra, Renflexis, and I think a couple more just came out. So this is a little old. This is from May of 2020. But there are many, many different options. So what this does is it opens the door for management philosophies for preferred products, almost like you have on the pharmacy side, where you have preferred products and you have a formulary on the medical side to address some of these costs. You could kick it to the next slide. So it drives big savings. Back in 2020, second quarter, $6.5 billion of savings. Now, a lot of that was driven by Remicade, because Remicade is the most expensive drug out there and some of the highest utilization. And then Neulasta, which is a drug that's used to assist in the treatment of oncology. So there is a lot kind of going on in this space. And, you know, further on down in the slides, we'll talk about some strategies to kind of address this stuff.
Hey, Kevin. Kevin, we actually we got a good question from Jennifer. She's really throwing out some good ones, and it's kind of going back a couple slides. And guys, this is just a free forum here, so feel free to ask Kevin and I any questions that you want. But you know, Jennifer asks, and I get this you know, asked of you all the time, Kevin, and if you could help us out here, what is the definition of a rebate? Is this different than a coupon? And you know, for folks in the industry to wrap their mind around like what is a rebate? Is it a coupon? Which obviously it's not. But Kevin, in layman's terms, how would you define a rebate, and certainly how would it differ from a coupon?
It's very similar to like if you buy a high efficiency fridge and then the company sends you money in the sometimes afterwards, like a rebate. That's exactly what it is, but it's on the pharmacy side. So, and I mean, in my personal opinion, you could classify the coupon as a rebate too. But the way that I think about a rebate is that the rebate is processed through the PBM and paid to the employer based on, you know, their formulary and other things. A coupon is something that it's another bucket of money the manufacturer offers that allows a member, let's say they had, I'm just making this up, $100 second tier copay. The coupon could reduce that to $25, so the member is only paying $25 instead of the $100. So in the broadest sense of the term, both a rebate and coupon are monies that the manufacturers are offering, even though they are in different buckets, to ultimately reduce the cost of the medication for both the employer and the member.
Right. So I always look at it as it's a matter of what do you want to do here, Mr. or Mrs. Employer? Do you want cash on hand in the form of a revenue, or do you want to lower the cost of the drug by using the coupon, which ultimately impacts claim spend? So it's really a matter of how do you want to tackle the situation? Do you want, you want cash on hand? Go with the rebates. If you want to tackle the cost of high specialty RX, then you can look at certainly the coupon side, manufacturers assistance programs, and things of that nature. You can't have both, unless Kevin, you would disagree. But to me, it's an either/or situation. I mean, it's either one or the other. You either are in it for the money and for the rebates, or you're in it to really tackle the cost of specialty drugs, and kind of either have them exit your claim ecosystem, or kind of diminish or defray the cost of that claim, that claim in particular. And that's how we typically view it.
Yep. And Brian, we'll have a couple slides further on where I have the distinction between the two programs you were talking about, the specialty copay program and the MAP program. But as far as site of service goes, I think this is an important notion, because we're going to have an example later in the deck where I think UltraBenefits is handling this correctly. So the dynamic that you're seeing here, let's take Remicade. The average markup for a drug in a hospital, so even in a hospital outpatient setting, is 124% above the cost of the drug. And in a physician office, you have 15% markup. And then I will tell you that home infusion is even less, even though home infusion is not on. So it becomes ultimately important for any comprehensive pharmacy management strategy that you do something with medical injectables, because these costs can be more than they are on the pharmacy side. So there's a lot of ways to do that. You can do site of care. You can move people from hospital, infusion center, physician office, and ultimately home infusion. You can do this concept of what's called white bagging, where you get the specialty drug from your pharmacy and they actually deliver it to the physician office. The problem with that is you get a lot of pushback from the physician because they're used to making so much money off of this. But this to me is a big deal. And if you really want to manage this, you got to have a site of service program in place.
Yeah, and just to kind of add some color, Kevin, to that. Yeah, Kevin and I, just for those that are attending, Kevin and I are working on we just finished wrapping up a case, a renewal for May with a broker where there was just about $500,000 in laser liability. Each of the 4 high-cost claimants were all on injectables. We were able to move those injectables, or we are going to be moving those injectables to either a home infusion or white bagging scenario. It all but eliminated the laser liability on those 4 high-cost claimants. 1 was completely eliminated. 3 others were reduced drastically for the client. And their overall max cost liability was reduced. It was a major win for the owner, and ultimately, it's going to extend down to the client too, where they can have that in the privacy of their own home. So there's a lot of programs out there that UltraBenefits and AlignRx can bring to the marketplace. So it's a good thing, and it's unfortunate that Kentucky is looking to prohibit white bagging. It's a shame.
Well, it is interesting because this is very nuanced, right? So people ask me, well, would you recommend white bagging, or would you recommend having it processed through the medical? And to me, it depends, right? So let's say that you have the person going through home infusion, or they're in a physician's office, and that physician's office fee schedule is where it's need to be, and it's being managed appropriately. You could have a situation where white bagging is more expensive. This is not a black and white situation. That's why you need to kind of look at the analysis to see what are the levers you can pull to drive the most savings. Because it's very nuanced. Because we have the same thing. Because I'm not to go down a rabbit hole here, but just based on the class of trade, physicians can buy the drugs cheaper than a specialty pharmacy can. The problem is physicians mark them up significantly. So it is a very interesting thing that requires a lot of analysis, but I'm currently looking at a lot of that stuff for our current clients right now. So if we look at kind of specialty management, what's going on, there's specialty copay programs, which we will talk about in a minute, patient assistance programs. This is what Brian was referring to as MAP. There's carve out, which is removing the decision-making from the PBM, which I'm all about this. And we'll talk about a unique solution to this later in the deck. International mail order, but here's the thing with international mail order, it is now moved to specialty. So it used to be that it was just branded products on non-specialty, but now it's over on specialty, and you can drive some significant savings doing that. And then medical injectable management, which we just talked about. And then, the MAP program on pharmacy, that's also available on the medical side. And then the other interesting thing basically is domestic fill, that we've had situations where a PBM's cost for a certain med is really high, and then we move that to be filled at another pharmacy for a significant reduction. So it is, there's a lot to do if you're willing to put the work in and explore some of these, and the group is okay with a little disruption. There's a way to manage this benefit appropriately. So let's let's talk about copay programs and patient assistance. So copay programs are like PrudentRx, Save On, where they are designed to help members that have high cost shares. There's no income requirement, so the member doesn't have to fall below a certain threshold. Requires the member has insurance. There are maximums with the amount you could save every month, and it needs to be coordinated through the PBM. So, for example, if you were with CVS, you would coordinate that through them in their program called PrudentRx. Now, the patient assistance programs, that's where you carve the drug outside the ecosystem. So this is what I was referring to as MAP, where you put in SPD language that removes coverage for these drugs, and they are then carved outside the ecosystem. The manufacturer pays 100%, and then the client is billed 30% of savings. So if you had a drug that was 100 grand, that basically drug goes from costing you $100,000 to $30,000. Now, there's a lot of nuance with this. Certain PBMs don't allow this. The big hurdle here is most members have to have a certain income, a low income. And then the medication is sourced through the manufacturer, so you don't earn any rebates on those drugs. So Kristen, you could kick to the next slide. And then just so you know, Jennifer, I do have a slide on GoodRx. We'll go over that in a minute because we'll talk about that. So let's further distinguishing these two programs. Your savings for a copay program, $7.50. It could be double that with a patient assistance program. Both programs require some type of SPD modification, so you have to be able to do that. With copay assistance, those claims process through the normal ecosystem, but with the MAP programs, they're outside the system. So if you think about that as far as claims reporting, that kind of thing, you need to have a mechanism. And then here's the other thing, you need to, and most of these programs work with stop loss carriers, you need to have a mechanism to get those charges over to the stop loss carrier so you could have the positive stop loss implications. With copay assistance, go back. So with copay assistance, since it's going through the ecosystem, you still earn a rebate on that claim, but with the manufacturer assistance, you do not. So there are a lot of different nuances, and what we do is we go through and evaluate that, right? Because what ends up happening all the time is a vendor will be like, well, we're going to save you $500,000, but they're not factoring the fact that not everyone qualifies, that there's going to be a rebate impact. So what we do is we vet these solutions and make sure that clients get an accurate portrayal of what their costs ultimately will be under that program. Because there's a lot of moving pieces. And we actually have some clients that do a combination of many solutions. So you could combine MAP, specialty copay, and this solution, international mail order, to have kind of a trifecta. And so for those of you that don't know what international mail order is, it's basically sourcing specialty meds from like tier 1 countries. And when I mean tier 1, I'm talking like Canada. I'm not talking like Mexico. These are kind of tier 1 countries where they have the appropriate governmental oversight, where you don't have to worry that you're getting some drug that isn't actually what the drug is, right? So you source the drug from a tier 1 country. Again, these process outside the ecosystem, and you're billed separately from one of the vendors, in this case, PriceMD or Optimed. Usually there's no member cost share because you want to incentivize the member to adopt these. And then they're not eligible for rebates. But if you kind of look at the savings, so I was just looking at this actually today. We had a client that has an individual that's on a medication called Sprycel. And the cost of that medication is $15,000 a year. And through international mail order, it's $7,500. So part of the interesting thing about this is you can come up with a really complex strategy where you stack solutions. So I'll give you an example. You would first determine whether they qualify for manufacturer assistance, because that means you save 70% on the drug, and that is the best option. The second option Could be international mail order, so you'd want to check there. The third option may be to do domestic sourcing, not through your PBM specialty pharmacy, but a standalone specialty pharmacy like OptiMed. And then the fourth one would be to have it processed normally through the PBM. Now, anytime that it processes through the PBM, you can get access to those specialty copay cards. So that's also stacked on top of it. So we have a group right now that we're coordinating all this, and unfortunately, OptiMed is doing a portion of it, and PriceMD is doing a portion of it because this was kind of like a legacy thing. So if OptiMed can't source it, we got to contact PriceMD. So we've kind of created a little bit of work for ourselves. But if you can drive costs down by 50% or more by using international mail order, I mean, for these groups, and everyone knows that it's a struggle. So someone is asking a question around, the kind of importation, is it legal? There's been a lot of discussion around this for many, and I will tell you, I've been doing this for 15 years, and and it depends who you talk to. So when I was at Health Now, we were a health plan, I brought that issue up all the time. Oh, you don't know if it's legal, what's going on? Because I wanted to fight against it because I wanted that going through my specialty pharmacy. But I will tell you that if you speak to one of these vendors, they will say that it's completely legal, the drugs are completely safe. And I've had groups on this for many years that have had no problems. Now, you could get even further where you go and say, well, I'm not going to source it internationally. I'm going to send somebody to the Caribbean to get an infusion done. And I know this sounds crazy, but you could potentially save money even by putting that member up in a hotel for 2 days to get that infusion done and fly them back to the United States and save significant money by getting that infusion done elsewhere. So I think what ends up happening with these is people have said for years that, well, math, it violates IRS rules and specialty copay. And the reality is nobody really cares about that. Like, it's not something that most groups are worried about. The IRS has never done anything with this. I have several groups today that are on specialty copay programs with high deductible plans with HRAs. So I will tell you that I've never had one group get any sort of compliance or legal trouble by offering some of these programs. It's just not something that happens. And then the vendors, I'm a big fan of OptiMed because they can do all three. So OptiMed does the MAP, which is the manufacturer assistance. And the reason why I like them is they're the cheapest as far as their fee. That's why I like them. And then, and I've worked with them for years, so I see what they've done and how they interact with members and making sure they have a smooth transition, because that's important too, right? So the other thing is there's a lot of other solutions right out there. And part of what I do in my practice is I meet with these vendors all the time. So I met with a vendor yesterday called TrueDataRx, and their whole claim to fame is they work with these PBMs to actually ultimately change the formulary, which I don't know, we'll see about that. I'm not too convinced that they can do that, because most of the times the PBMs will not allow you to do that without penalizing you from a rebate perspective. But there are other programs out there, like Scripta does like physician outreaching and member outreach to get members on lower cost products. USRX Care has a specialty outsourcing option and a physician detailing program. CCS Medical is a diabetes vendor that it's an interesting model that they have. They actually get meters that are, again, I'm not a technology person, but somehow they're connected to the cloud, and they're able to, when someone falls out of compliance with their A1C, they have someone reaching out to them to get them back on track. It's kind of like a concierge diabetes program. And we've had some clients that have had a lot of great success with that, because it's not necessarily a pharmacy play, because ultimately you see the savings on the medical side, but we have a lot of clients that struggle with diabetes as one of the main drivers of cost for their organizations. So here we go. GoodRx. I like GoodRx. I think that it's a nice solution. I want to distinguish between two different discount cards. You have like a SureScripts or a GoodRx. These are entities that use multiple networks to get access to these drugs. And then you have discount card programs from each of these pharmacies, right? So CVS has their own discount card list, and basically it's a list of drugs they offer at a reduced rate. And then you have to sign up for that program through CVS. GoodRx is interesting, and Amazon's kind of getting into this space, so we'll see who wins with those two giant companies. But if you click to the next slide, I'll give you a sense how GoodRx works. So those familiar with like a MAC concept, which is maximum allowable cost, the PBMs will pay pharmacies based on a MAC list for drugs that are generic. So the way that it works is you could have 100 drugs at 100 different prices, and that MAC price is dictated by a lot of different things, one of which is the number of manufacturers. So as manufacturers go up, you get better pricing because there's more options for that. It also can vary by pharmacy. So you could go to Walgreens and pay $10 and go across the street and pay $7, assuming your copay was 15 and it was below that. You could have different prices at different pharmacies. Well, what GoodRx does is they get you to access multiple MAC lists from multiple PBMs. So you're not just getting pricing from CVS, you're getting it from ESI, Welldyne, Navitus is another one that's a big GoodRx partner. And now when you go to that pharmacy, you're not only looking at what CVS price is for that drug, you're looking at Express Scripts, Optum, and then you pick the best one. Now, where you kind of get into trouble with GoodRx is oftentimes you have to then submit a direct claim to your PBM in order to get credit towards any type of deductible or accumulator. So it is a little more inconvenient, but interestingly enough, UltraBenefits has a solution where the discount card is integrated into the benefit. And we'll talk about that for a minute when we get to the final slides, but it is a very unique option. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the discount card. All right, so this is what I do for a living. I evaluate PBMs. So there are a bunch of different ones out there. There are standalone PBMs, large, small. There are coalitions. Each have pluses and minuses. People always ask me, what's your favorite PBM? And I will tell you, I don't have one. I'm agnostic. I feel that each PBM has its pluses and minuses, and based on the client requirements, they may or may not be a great fit. I don't subscribe to the notion that, well, I had a bad experience with this PBM, I'm never going back to them, because if you did that, you would never have a PBM, because they're problematic for sure. And I think the other big piece here is the financials, having strong financials, contract terms that are solid around definitions, exclusions, that kind of thing. You want to be cognizant of disruption, obviously, because that's going to impact your members. And I know employers these days are ultra sensitive to this given the labor market. So we've had a lot of plans that weren't necessarily interested in causing a lot of disruption because of their, the potential impact for their employees. Clinical management's big. Making sure that your dollars being managed from a clinical perspective, extremely important. And then obviously account management, right? Nothing's more frustrating than when you have a benefit issue and your PBM doesn't get back to you for a week. So luckily with UltraBenefits, we're involved. So we coordinate with a lot of the different issues with PBMs and get them resolved, because we have team members that are at a certain level in these PBMs to get things resolved. And then the other big thing is the ancillary programs, right? Like you want to be able to put on a MAP program or a diabetes program, and you don't want to be restricted by what the PBM is offering. So when I'm looking at PBMs and which ones to source, with my clients, these are kind of the main topics, and we could spend an hour on each one of these topics, but as a general rule, this is what you want to look at. So let's talk about UltraBenefits, because I'm kind of proud of this. We did a lot of great stuff with UltraBenefits, and they really get it in how to manage specialty and PBM. So Number one, they have multiple PBM options. That's important because again, ESI is not for everyone. CVS isn't for everyone. So you want to have a bunch of different options. They have unique PBM solutions where you're not going to get these anywhere else in the market. They are unique to UltraBenefits, and we'll talk about those in a second. Their pricing is very aggressive, and I know this because I negotiated it. So we have a process that I take great joy in extracting as much value out of these PBMs as possible because, you know, in my opinion, they make too much money. So annual market checks for their pricing, so the pricing gets better every year. Customized trend management programs, which we'll talk about in a second. Medical injectable management, we kind of touched on how important that is. And then obviously enhanced account management to get things done. You want to make sure that your members, if the issue does come up, and they will come up, that you have someone that's in your corner to get these things addressed. So let's talk about the unique PBM solution. So I want to bring out two in particular. So Navitus, which is a transparent PBM focused on clinical management, they've integrated cash into the solution that UltraBenefits has access to. And what I mean by that is you don't have to show your GoodRx card when you go to the pharmacy. It's automatically taken into account where it's a lot of technology stuff. I'm not a big technology guy, but it's using the switch. And when that claim comes in, it checks against Navitus's discount card and then all these others to ultimately come up with the best price. And that's what you pay at the pharmacy. This is very innovative stuff. There's no PBM that's out there doing this today. And Navitus is kind of at the forefront of this, but it gets at that notion that I bet you a lot of you have heard, why am I paying more at the pharmacy with my insurance than I am without it? So that is a very unique solution. And then the second one is getting what we were talking about before about the PBM making your UM. So part of the problem that I have with companies like Express Scripts is their pricing's great, but their UM is not that great. So there's a deal here, which is an ESI platform where the UM and physician detailing program are carved out to a third-party health plan that controls which drugs are approved and then also reaches out to members to get them on lower cost products. So basically what you're doing is you're combining large PBM economics with the outsourced specialty option. To me, it is a very unique solution out there. There's not anybody that's doing this today with the level of clinical focus that this company is doing, because if you think about it, ESI is not going to allow you on your own to implement a physician detailing program because they're going to lose out on rebates. But the pricing on this deal was based on a health plan that was 1 million lives. So you're getting access to pricing that 1 million lives can get. So when you combine that aggressive pricing with these clinical programs, it is a home run all day long. It is definitely a solution that has been very popular with a lot of our clients that struggle with ESI and folks doing the appropriate job when looking at UM. So the last thing I want to cover, and we'll leave a few minutes for questions, is so we talked about medical injectables, and this is a real live case. So we had a member that was currently getting an infusion at a hospital outpatient center. It was Ocrevus, which is a drug for MS, 600 milligrams. The individual was driving because they lived in rural, I forgot where they lived, but it was somewhere rural. And they were driving an hour to the hospital and then back again. And each infusion was costing $46,000. Now, luckily, the infusion's only done twice a year, but even so, that's a total of $92,000 for the infusion. So we kind of looked at that and we said, well, if we move this member to home infusion, what would the cost be? So we looked into it, and the home infusion cost was $35,000 and change. So not only that, is that the member didn't have to go anywhere. The member could be at home. The nurse would travel to that person's house, give them the infusion, and the member was over the moon happy because they were no longer having to drive an hour to get their medication. The group went from paying 92, you know, $92,000 for 2 infusions to a drastically reduced rate, where you're getting a ton of savings. So this is kind of a real life example of where you are saving a ton of money over time by moving the member to the appropriate site of care. Oftentimes that's home infusion. So I think that's my last slide. I wanted to leave some room for questions because I think we covered a lot. There's a lot of complexity in what we were talking about, but I think with UltraBenefits, you're going to get access to the cutting edge pharmacy benefit management solutions because they've invested in some resources there. And we actually have real life examples where, whether it's aggressive PBM contracting or these ancillary services, both on the medical and on the pharmacy side, that have driven costs down substantially.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. This is Kristen with UltraBenefits. Unfortunately, Brian, he got knocked off, I guess, and he's trying to get back in. So instead of the delay, I thought I'd jump in for him. First of all, Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. This was a great presentation as always, and we appreciate the partnership. And as far as the participants on this webinar today, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend. We hope you found this information useful, enlightening, all of the above. And certainly if you have any questions, we have some time left that you can reach out and ask. And also, as Kevin had mentioned earlier, we do partner with them. We are available to use any PBM that you so choose or that your client chooses. We work for you and the client, not the PBM. And if anyone is interested in evaluating your PBM or your self-funded client's PBM, please feel free to reach out and we'll go from there. But Kevin, I don't have access to the chat or questions right now, so I don't know if any additional ones had come in since the end of the presentation. Okay.
I have not seen any.
All righty. Well, again, we thank you, everybody. We will be in touch for those of you that this presentation was recorded, and we can certainly share Kevin's presentation with you as well, and happy to do so. We'll be in touch. If you want to reach out to us beforehand, please do. You have our contact information, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon.